Chapter 18. The coast proved quite different from what the Dalmascans had expected, for although they were accustomed to sand and heat, the deserts of Dalmasca baked under a dry sun while the beaches of Rosaria sweltered in humidity, and the fine sand of Dalmasca seemed akin to dust in comparison to the coarse, rocky gravel that they now walked on. Though they technically had landed on neutral territory, Rosaria's border neared them, and the exotic jungles the empire had grown famous for extended quite close to the ocean. Galmor jungle surrounded the base of Mount Boromyces, a geological wonder, and while the mountain declared itself neutral to all conflicts and policies, the Vieira that dwelled below had declared themselves hostile to all trespassers, making the summit accessible only by airship. However, the Vieira revered the mountain as holy, just as the humans did, and therefore maintained a peaceful truce with those on it, speaking the human language to them and sometimes trading food and supplies with them. Anywhere else, the Vieira remained nothing more than a myth. Fran appeared to know the area faintly, and scanned the horizon with great awareness, struggling to refresh her memory. She did not lead the others onward immediately, however, for Vaughn and Penelo had eagerly darted toward the ocean as soon as they laid eyes on it. Monty looked to Balthier pleadingly, and the pirate released an irritated sigh.
"Just stay where I can see you, should make things easier."
"For us both," the boy replied, heading out toward the surf. Bosch and Ashalia watched the children play with mildly subdued interest, both rather distracted with the coming journey through the unknown, but also taking comfort in the joy that their companions brought along. Vaughn and Penelo had grown far too serious since meeting Ash, too engrossed the struggle for their homeland, and seeing them enjoy the trip to foreign lands seemed to lift the great shadow that had settled over the general mood of the group. Of greater interest, however, was their complete willingness to welcome Monty into their midst, two Dalmascans, happily playing with an Arcadian on neutral land. That such a sight might become commonplace stirred new hope in Ash's dim heart, though she unfortunately found such acceptance difficult to cultivate within her own attitude. Lamont was no ordinary Arcadian, she could not deny this, and even if she tried, he too greatly resembled his brother for her to succeed. The Solidar men were renowned for their chivalry, intelligence, and stunning good looks. All were thin and tall, with broad shoulders and sturdy hips, and Monty proved no exception, though he still somewhat retained the fair features and build of childhood. Most notable now, however, was the structure of his bones. He had always been a lean, lanky little thing, but his recent starvation had done away with the baby fat that primarily denoted his age, leaving in its wake the strong, boxy jaw that ran in his family and the eerily calm seriousness that so often overcame his big brother's expression. He had finally begun to resemble a prince. And it made Ash shudder. Rather than allow herself to think too hard into her own childhood, she turned to Bosch and awkwardly spoke,
"I suppose he's something of a nephew to you?"
He regarded her with mild surprise, but his relief that she should speak even indirectly of his brother without anger superseded this, and he turned his eyes back to the water and continued walking as he replied,
"May as well be. But don't think you'll be able to get rid of me that easily. Even you have to admit that he needs a babysitter more than I do," she went on. At that very moment her foot sank into a particularly deep pit of sand and she lurched forward in search of balance, finding instead Balthier's hand. As he caught hold of her right arm, Bosch steadied her by the left, but she quickly shook both of them off. "You were saying?"
Bosch asked. Balthier smiled with arrogant bemusement.
"Hasn't living in a desert all your life taught you anything about walking in the sand?"
She yanked her hand free of his lingering grip.
Hasn't living in Arcadia all your life taught you anything about touching women?
Bosch laughed.
It's not in the nature of royalty to be grateful. Perhaps we should trade,
Balthier offered.
Make her see how good she's got it.
The Landesian cocked his head now, trying not to smile.
Good idea. What?
Ashalia asked flatly.
Try not to rough her up too much,
Bosch told Balthier as he headed toward the kids.
No promises,
Balthier replied.
Fine.
Ash called after Bosch.
I've earned a vacation.
With an undeniably childish huff, she plopped herself down on a nearby rock. Balthier and Fran exchanged a few words in Vieren before she calmly walked off into the shade of a tree that provided a better view of the chaos that was Vaughn, Penello, Bosch, and Monty building a sand castle.
What was that?
Ashalia asked.
What was what?
Balthier replied.
Must you always be so difficult? Comes with the territory, so I'm told.
She huffed.
I don't see why she even bothers to stick around.
He studied her expression for a moment, then explained.
It's not like that. Then what is it that you two are always so intently discussing without the rest of us? The weather.
Ash leveled her eyes at him with striking emotion, and he continued with a poorly subdued huff of irritancy.
All right. Just now, she asked how old Monty is. That's it.
The princess asked.
Age is a strange thing to Viera. To her, a 10-year-old is still an infant. Really? Really? So that's all you said?
A salty breeze rustled the leaves above them and he ran a hand through his hair.
I told her I want to get rid of him. You do?
She asked, straightening her hair as well, though she had little success with the wind gusting from behind her.
Well, I don't really mind him so much,
said Balthier,
but it's not smart, keeping him around with his brother on the loose. What did she say? She said I'm stupid and she likes him. Oh. Right up your alley, eh? For the most part.
The breeze ceased, and she leaned back on her wrists.
I do agree that we shouldn't keep him for too long, though. Vane doesn't strike me as the type to take this sort of thing lightly. Especially now that he's got so much power to throw around. But Lamont isn't like Vane. His influence might actually get us somewhere. Placing an awful lot of trust in the little chapter.
She raised an eyebrow.
You think I shouldn't? I didn't say that. Then you're shocked that I should trust anyone. I didn't say that, either.
And now she turned her gaze back out to the sea.
Well, then I can only assume you're fishing for more collateral. Ouch,
said Balthier.
Is it really so hard for you to be optimistic? Yes, as a matter of fact. No pirate works without payment and no Arcadian works for the resistance. The only reason you could possibly have to help us is that it somehow serves your own selfish whim. Whim.
He took a step back at this, glaring at her with what she correctly perceived as hurt masked by anger. She was right, though he refused to let her know it, and instead he mirrored her glare as he reclaimed his ground with a step forward and spoke,
All right. You want me to level with you? I don't care about your money, and I don't care about your revolution. I care about your dear little rock. You may not be able to admit it, but that thing is getting to you. Getting to me?
She scoffed sharply, rising from her seat and matching his advance.
I am not out to conquer all in my sight, I'm not Gramis. You know very well that this stone is useless to me. And yet you still carry it around like it's going to save your soul. I keep it only to prevent it from falling into the hands of the Empire. If you really believe that it's useless to you, what makes you think it would be any danger to you?
At this her eyes averted, and he knew he'd won, though he remained unsure of whether or not it would do her any good.
You think there's still hope of recharging it, using it, or at the very least leaving it to your descendants to use?
She folded her arms.
I would never burden my family with such a decision. Wraithwall did,
he pointed out.
He sought only to protect our line,
she defended quietly, turning and stepping out of the shade.
Do you really think so?
Balthier asked, following her as she headed slowly for the surf.
I think he was testing your line. I think he knew that the Nethysite would destroy you if you used it, and I think he knew that anyone willing to use it would need to be destroyed.
She stopped about halfway to the shoreline and turned her face up as though inspecting the horizon for an incoming ship.
Then I'll destroy the Nethysite.
Balthier's eyes remained focused on her.
Are you sure? You insult my intelligence,
she said, glancing at him out of the corner of her eye before turning her face back down toward her feet.
Unintentionally, I assure you,
he replied as she began walking once more.
But it's true, the best purpose invites the worst trouble. Lusting for ever greater power, blinded by a simple rock.
She turned and met his eyes.
Is that how you see me? No, but that's how I've seen others.
And now he walked past her, toward the darkened sand near the waves.
Meaning?
She turned to watch him.
It's a long story. I'm listening. Just don't give up, do you?
He looked to his side, finding her standing there, the toes of her boots licked with sea foam.
Enough with the act, Highness, I know you've no interest in anything I have to say. Now you insult my compassion,
she bit back with a frown.
Face the facts, Balthier, I'm going to get it out of you one way or another. Triple M? Sounds fun.
She shot him another of her jabbing glares.
Very well, then,
he said with a smirk.
I suppose it's my duty as a man to indulge what ladies ask it of me. Ahem. Right. Sorry. Oh, where to begin? Let's just put it this way, I once knew a man who was obsessed with Nethysite. Not all his life, mind you, but for a decent part of it, from the very moment the damned rock was discovered. From then on, it was all he cared about, second to none, not even his family. Everything he did to get closer to the Nethysite, to document it, understand it. It was time-consuming work, but vast technological accomplishments were achieved through his research. He made fuses, airships, weapons. He even made me a judge. A judge? You. Not a very good one, which I imagine makes me one of the best. Nevertheless, it's all part of a time I'd rather forget. And thankfully, it didn't last long. I left the judiciary, and him. Good old Sidolphus Bonanza, Drockler Laboratories' very own Dr. Sid. He loved science more than anything, and his wife was well aware of it. I found her lying out in the garden one day, beneath her favorite tree. I thought she was asleep, until I got close enough to see the blood. I gave the note to him, sealed, just as I found it, but he burned it before I could ever read what she wrote. That's when he lost his heart to science, when he lost himself. And I suppose that's when I lost my father. First it was just curiosity, and then it was hope. Now it's fear, right? Next comes pride, then arrogance, then ambition, and before long you've got voices in your head and no time for anything else. Please understand, if you love only one thing, you'll reject the love of all others, whether you intend it or not. Even if you truly mean to destroy the Nethysite, who's to say you'll be able to when the time comes? You can't base your whole world on one experience,
she said quietly, stepping toward him, but then halting for fear of excessive closeness.
Where some may fail, others could just as easily triumph. Hey!
He granted her a casual smirk.
There it is. What? Optimism. Did it hurt? Practice what you preach.
He seemed to look past her then, and after a moment, called out,
Monty.
She turned to face her cortege out on the beach. Vaughn, Bosch, and Fran knelt in the sand, struggling to keep the castle from collapsing, and Penelo waded out in the water, one hand hiking up her skirt while the other fished for seashells, but the prince they had been so lucky to find seemed to have now gone missing. Just as Ash prepared to call out to him as well, his voice sounded from a short distance behind them.
Up here.
Looking to the tree they had previously stood beneath, they saw him jump down from the branches with a handful of leaves.
Oh, for God's sake!
Balthier groaned. Monty laughed.
You wouldn't last 10 minutes in my cortege.
Another half-hour passed before they set out again, and Ash and Balthier supervised the castle building with perhaps more amusement than such an activity should have provided grown adults. The shells became windows, the leaves flags. Fran appeared both baffled and bemused by the commotion, clearly unsure of what to do, but taking great interest in watching and occasionally fetching a few handfuls of damp sand when prompted. When the creation reached its completion, it resembled less of a castle and more of a foreign beast of indiscernible species, but all felt quite proud of it nonetheless, and they shared a sorrowful laugh when the incoming tide washed it away. And then, bereft of their entertainment, they continued on their journey.